You had a wonderful Christmas and looking forward to a new year again, one more trip around the sun, right? You know, I was on that cruise on Sunday, and and I always say when I'm preaching, I'm always looking at the door to see who's going to walk in, I'm looking for you every Sunday if you're not here. And John sent me a picture of Charlotte. She was looking at the door, and John says she just can't figure out where you're at. And that's just been on my heart all week long. That just made my week. And me and Susie, we talked about that several times. And so I don't know if you guys missed me or not, but Charlotte missed me. So that was enough. It's enough for me. So anyway, that was a lot of fun. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, you spend a lot of time lost, for the first couple of days. You don't know which way's forward, which way's backwards, and which way's port and starboard and fore and aft and all those things. And I think Debbie and Susie were lost the entire cruise on that boat. But you kind of do that. In Jordan, we were somewhere, and Jordan said something about being lost. And I said, well, lost can mean two things. I said, either it means you don't know where you're at or you don't know where you're going, right? I said, there's two ways to be lost in the world. And I got thinking about that from a Christian perspective and from a life perspective, and it kind of made me kind of think about some things. And I thought about being lost, and I thought about times in my life when I've been lost, and not lost in a sense of not knowing where my soul was going, but the loss of kind of been a loss for where I am. And I think maybe I'm kind of that way in my life in a way right now. It's not knowing where we are, right? It's a fear of today, isn't it? Have you ever really been lost in your life? I mean, really lost. I was snow skiing one time when I was a kid. I decided to go off track, go ski some powder. I was all by myself. I was only like 12 years old. And, back in those days, we just let our kids go everywhere, do whatever they wanted to do. Nobody cared. And I was off, and I got out there in the middle. I couldn't hear anything. And I couldn't see anything, and I'd stop, and I'd listen, and I couldn't, and nothing. And I kind of panicked a little bit. And I knew in my mind that I was going to come out eventually, but I'm like, here I am up here in this deep powder snow. I can't hear anybody. I can't see anybody. If I just disappear out here, nobody's going to find me till spring. And, I was a little bit panicked. It's scary. It's kind of scary to be lost, isn't it? I've lost my kids a few times, and they were okay with it because they knew where they were. But I wasn't, because I didn't know where they were. So lost is a lot of different things. But there's times in our life when we get a little lost. Sometimes it's a change in our life, right? Either a change from being in high school to getting a job. That's a big thing, isn't it? Sometimes you feel a little lost. What do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? What do I want to be? Where am I going to go? Where am I going to end up? And we feel a little bit confused. What people come up to you. What are you going to do? What's your major? I don't know. I thought about it. And it gets a little scary sometimes, right? Sometimes when we retire from a job, or maybe our kids move out of the house, or things happen. And all of a sudden we don't have that place we were that kind of grounds us. In my life as a minister, I've seen a lot of and I've seen a lot of people that were illnesses, lengthy illnesses, where they laid in a bed or stayed in a room for a long, long time before they ever passed. And I saw those people, those parents or spouses or kids or whatever that was taking care of them, this caretaker, that oftentimes just stayed in that house with them day after day after day and watched over them and took care of them and cleaned them up and fed them and gave them their medicine. And one of the saddest things about when situation, and something I run into many times in my life, is that when that person finally passes away, it really is a huge void in a person's life. Amy probably can relate to this or tell you that right now. It's a huge void. You think, well, that's a lot of responsibility to have to clean up after somebody, take care of somebody, feed them and do all these things. But it becomes so consuming in your life that it's what you do, it's who you are, it's your identity. And then all of a sudden when that person passes, all of a sudden you're kind of lost, right? You're a little bit lost. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I need to do. I've kind of lost where I'm at. When kids leave or when kids come, right? That's a big thing in our lives. We call it empty nest syndrome. Susie was crying. I was waving, see you, right? But it's a big deal. It changes how we live, what we think. If we have a death of somebody in our life that's really influential. A lot of times people that have been married for 50 or 60 years, and there's people in this congregation who can relate to this. When that spouse dies, it's hard to pick up from that. And I haven't had to experience that personally, but I've seen it many times in this congregation where people that have been married for many, many years and a spouse dies and they just are totally lost. They just don't know. I remember I'm not going to mention names, but I always remember a certain gentleman in the congregation that his wife passed. They've been married for, 50 years, I guess, or maybe better. I don't know. And I went to see him one day, and I walked in, and he was just sitting in a chair in his living room in the dark. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, how are you? How are you, brother? And he says, I just don't know. He says, I don't even know if I have any money, and I don't know where the checkbook is, and I don't know how to pay the bills, and I just don't know. And he was just sitting in the dark. And it makes you realize how dependent we get on those people that are close to us, and when that changes, and we're lost. He was lost. He didn't know what to do. He was sitting there, and he really did not know what to do. And interestingly, within 3 or 4 months, he had passed away himself. Kind of a tragic situation, but it's hard when that happens, right? Change in our jobs, lose a job, right? Sam went through that recently, had to go through a job change, big transition, right? And trying to fit into that, sometimes it means we lose, sometimes we don't get that good a job. Sometimes it degrades our life, so that's a big thing in some people's lives. I was just trying to think of some examples. An illness or disease, that changes the way you look at life, let me tell you. If you think if you get a terminal disease or a bad illness or something that you're no longer able to function like you were able to function, it changes your life. Sometimes we're a little lost. We don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to handle it. Sometimes a divorce or even getting married, that's a big change. And sometimes we have a hard time adjusting. And we go through grief a lot of times in a process because we're a little lost. We kind of lose our focus, lose what we know. But also, sometimes we don't know where we're going. We fear tomorrow. I do that sometimes, right? I think we all do a little bit. We don't know where we're going, where we're going to wind up. Boy, when I was young, it seemed easy, Had all that time to make all the mistakes I wanted, I could recover. The older you get, the more you realize you don't have many mistakes left, right? You kind of get into that point in your life where mistakes really count, right? It's like getting to the fourth quarter of a ball game, You don't want to fumble in the fourth quarter. It's a bad thing, right? And so we kind of fear tomorrow, don't we? It's uncertain, right? We fear uncertainty. I do a little bit. I think we all do. We worry what will happen. We worry if somebody that we depend on might pass away, or we worry about maybe our security, our financial security, or other things within our lives. We become uncertain. We're scared about what's going to happen, and that's human nature. Jesus tells us just to worry about today, but I haven't really found a human on earth that's able to exclusively do that. I just haven't really found that person yet that can just never worry about tomorrow, It sounds good, hard to do. We fear death, don't we? We fear death. Not because I fear death itself. I don't think it matters. Once I'm gone, I don't think I'm going to worry about it anymore at that point. But I fear it. I fear it for my family. I fear it for not being able to be here to take care of them and to help them and how they'll deal with that. So I think, death's a big issue, and we fear that, and we probably should. I think there's a reason. I think it's a healthy fear. Sometimes we're a victim of materialism or single focus. That's one of the saddest things in a person's life. I had some dear friends of mine, once again, not going to mention names. I had some dear friends of mine one time, and all they ever wanted in their life was to kind of be successful. They were just working class people, and they always wanted to kind of make the break, kind of have it, And they did. He made a really wise decision, got into this business, and started to really be financially stable. They built a beautiful house on a beautiful property with several acres and beautiful swimming pool and koi pond and all those things they ever wanted. Driving nice vehicles and all those things they wanted. And when they kind of got done with that, they became the most miserable people I ever met in my life. You know, their whole life, what they wanted was that. And when they got it, they realized that wasn't going to cut it, right? And at that point, they were lost. They're like, well, we don't know now. We don't know what's going to make us happy. This didn't work. You know, we got all these things we wanted, but this didn't work. And that's what happens. Sometimes we get so focused on a single thing in our life or something materialistic or something so singular focused in our life, and when we achieve that thing, then we're like, well, now what do I do? You know, what's next? You know, what do I do? Where am I at? What am I going to do? What do I do now? And I think that's a tragic place that we get to in our lives, and we get lost, don't we? We get lost. I want to talk to you about a guy named Elijah. Most of y'all know Elijah, but I don't know how well you know the story of Elijah. I love Elijah. I love this story. I love this prophet. You know, when Israel was divided into the southern and northern kingdoms, and we know about them southern kingdom guys, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, we know about those guys. Those are the major prophets, right? They get books. They got their own book, right? But you know, we don't think much about these northern kingdom guys because the northern kingdom was so bad and so awful and so terrible, and God was going to carry it away. The Assyrians are going to come and carry it away. But in the middle of all this, God calls these prophets, and the ones we probably know the best are Elijah and Elisha. God calls these prophets, and they're northern kingdom prophets. And they're preaching about God to people who are not going to listen. They're not going to listen. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter how powerful they are. Doesn't matter how much God's with them. It's irrelevant. These people are not going to turn back to God. It's not going to happen, and it's no secret. And yet God says, you go and preach to these people who are never going to change. That's what I love about Elijah and Elisha. And so Elijah is this guy, this wild man prophet that's hiding out in the wilderness, that's preaching God's word. Ahab, Jezebel are wanting to find him. Nobody can find him, you know. Goes to Obadiah. Says, go tell Ahab that I'm going to come see him today. And Obadiah says, don't make me do that. He says, as soon as I say that, Ahab's going to kill me. You're not going to be found. Ahab's going to kill me. Don't make me do that. And Elijah says, listen to me. He says, go and tell Ahab I'm going to see him today, and because I'm going to see him. I'm going to come see Ahab. You know, all he's been running, been hiding from Ahab. He's been hiding from Jezebel. Y'all know Jezebel. Even if you don't know Jezebel, you know she ain't no good, right? So, I mean, when you say Jezebel, it's like that lion, tigers, and bears thing. When you say Jezebel, you go, ooh, Jezebel, right? So you know Jezebel ain't no good. So Jezebel, she's after him too. And so Elijah, he comes before Ahab, right? And he challenges these prophets of Baal and these 450 prophets of Baal. And he says, listen, he says, you build an altar and I'll build an altar. And I'll put a sacrifice and you put a sacrifice. And you pray to Baal to consume your sacrifice. And I'll pray to God to consume my sacrifice. And we're going to prove today who's God over Israel. You know, that's a challenge. He's throwing it down, right? He's throwing it down. I love this story. And so Elijah, he says, he comes to this thing, and they've tried, right? The prophets of Baal, they've tried, they've cut themselves, they've danced, they've screamed, they've cried out, and Baal just isn't answered, right? So Elijah said, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord. And Baal's prophets are 450 men. Now let us give them 2 oxen and let them choose 1 ox for themselves and cut it up and place it on the wood and put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other ox and lay it on the wood, and I will not put a fire under it. So he said, this is the challenge. This is the throwdown. This is like reality TV on a God scale. He said, this is what we're going to do, right? We're going to make these 2 altars, make these bowls up. We're going to set them on this altar, and then we're going to ask our gods to provide the fire. And so they do this, and the prophets go crazy, right? They dance, and they sing, and they pray, and they cut themselves, and they bleed all over everything, if you read the scripture, right? Cutting themselves, praying, calling out to Baal. And it came about, I love this part, because this is the kind of the coup de grace, right? So Elijah gets to come out and gets to poke him a little bit, right? I mean, it's always good when you're challenging somebody and theirs don't work and you get to poke them a little bit, you know. So Elijah comes out and he's going to poke him a little. And he says, it came about at noon, Elijah mocked him and said, call out with a loud voice, for he is a god, either he is occupied or gone aside or is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and needs to be awakened. So Elijah, he's goading them on, right? Do it a little louder, boys. Sing a little louder. Cut yourself a little more. You know, you need to wake this God up because he ain't doing anything. And so, boy, this is Elijah's day, isn't it? I've been thinking about this quite a bit in the last few days. So this was Elijah's day, right? And so he mocked him, and he did that, and he says, just keep calling out, right? What's the best life? One. I almost give y'all paper and pencil. One day, best day of your life. One day of your life, one day. And God comes to you and he says, Buck, you get to do one day over. One day of your life. One day of your past. One day you get to do it again. What day would you choose? You ever ask yourself that question? What day is the best day of your life? I thought about this. I really did. Quite a bit. What was the best day of your life? And you know, I know my day. I do. The best day of my life was the day I married my wife. No doubt in my mind. Hands down. That was the best day of my life. We were poor. We were broke. We didn't have anything. We had $300 to do a wedding. Susie made her dress. She made all the bridesmaids' dress. I got my high school best. She had to wait on me to graduate out of high school. I just graduated out of high school. I borrowed suits from my high school buddies to wear for best man suits. I rented a tux. Mom made ribs. My stepbrother took pictures, and my brother-in-law preached it. And my friend's sister made the flowers, and we did it for $300. And I'm going to tell you, my wife cleaned every hand-cook store, which that doesn't mean anything to you now because we're in the digital age, but we cleaned every hand-cook store in 4 states out for buttons to make my wife's dress. My brother-in-law was a truck driver, and we had him stopping in every town he went in to go to hand-cooks to get all them buttons to make that dress because you couldn't just get on Amazon and order buttons. You had to go get them. And we didn't have no money. And after we were done getting married, we had a Volkswagen pickup I borrowed from my mom. We had a tent and a cook stove. We went to Porham and stayed in this old dilapidated Airstream camper that Susie's granddad had. And then we went and we stayed on the side of lakes and streams, and we ran out of the $300 we had. Best day of my life. You know why? Because that's one day of my life I had everything I ever wanted. I had the woman I loved. I didn't owe anybody anything. I didn't have anything. I didn't care. You know? Best day of my life. What's the best day of your life? If you could go back, if God came to you and said, I'll give you one day to do again. One day to live again. What day would you pick? I know my day. You know your day? This is Baal's best day. I mean, this is Elijah's best day. It's the best day of his life. Right? Isn't it? The best day of his life. He goes to God. He says, listen, God, let's prove you're right. And the fire of the Lord fell and consumed. If you read this story, right, they poured buckets of water on it, and they filled the trench with water. They poured water on it 3 times till the whole trench was filled with water. And he calls down this fire from heaven. And God, as God does, it's just abundant, right? I mean, it's not like a little lightning bolt spark comes down from heaven. He devours everything. Fire coming from heaven. Can you imagine that? And Elijah's there, and they couldn't do anything, and then God does this, and I can feel it. You know, this was the best day of Elijah's life. He was on top of the world. Doesn't get any better than this. I'm showing these people. I'm showing them who God really is. They're going to turn back. How can they deny it? And the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and even the stones and the dust. And it licked up the water that was in the trench. You ever see fire lick something up? It licked up the fire that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and they said, the Lord, He is God. Oh, Lord, he is God. And it was the best day of Elijah's life, right? Best day of his life. But I want to tell you something. The best day of Elijah's life was also the worst day of Elijah's life. Because what Elijah wanted to happen didn't happen. The people still didn't turn back to God. And although he killed all the prophets of Baal, and then what does he do? You know, this is going to get better before it gets worse. This is the best day, even better, right? So Elijah's on top of the world, man. He just proved that God's God. I mean, this is miraculous, glorious, powerful proof. This is right there for everybody to see. And Elijah's right in the middle of it, and Elijah's loving it, right? And then this is a drought. Remember the story, right? We've been in a drought. James talks about this, doesn't he? Elijah was a man like as we are and prayed that it would rain, and it rained. And so they're in the middle of this drought. And Ahab went up to eat and drink, but Elijah went to the top of Carmel. He crouched down on the earth. He put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, go up and look toward the sea. There's a sermon in this. We're not going to do it. There's a sermon in this. And he said, go back 7 times. And about the 7th time, he said, look, behold, a cloud as small as a man's hand is coming up from the sea. And he says, go up and say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down so that the heavy shower does not stop you. So Elijah burned up the altar, burned up the sacrifice, burned up the rocks, burned up the dirt, burned up the water. And then he's going to end a 7-year-long drought, right? This isn't getting any better. I mean, this is the best day ever. Somebody told me, who was that told me? Oh, it was Raymond telling me. It says, you get everything you want for Christmas. And I asked him if he got a new motorcycle. He said, I don't need a motorcycle. So I was going to win the lottery. And I said, well, that's better because then you could buy everything. You could buy another motorcycle. The problem with me winning the lottery is unless one of y'all buy me a ticket, it ain't never going to happen. And then you would feel bad because it really would be your ticket and I would feel bad. So let's just not do that. But anyway, but you know, this is like winning the lottery, right? I mean, this is as good as it gets. And Elijah's on top of the world, man. He's on top of the world. But guess what? Day's not done, right? Ahab, Jezebel, they're after him. And so as good as this is, and as powerful as this is, and as wonderful as this is, all of a sudden Elijah is in fear of his life. He's running for his life. He's running, he's girded up. The Bible says he girds up his garments, and he ties them up around his waist, and he's running for his life. After all this tremendous thing and all this wonderful thing and the best day of his life, and all of a sudden he's running for his life, and the best day of his life, what's the worst day of your life? You know, I just asked you what the best day of your life was, and that's kind of happy to think about, isn't it? What's the worst day of your life? I don't want you to answer that because it'll be depressing. I know my worst day. What's the worst day of your life? Because Elijah got the best day of his life and the worst day of his life in one day. But there's a lesson. So Elijah's running for his life, and he finally comes down, and he sits down beside this brook. And he sits down under this juniper tree. And this prophet who had just defeated Baal, who had just saw the mighty and awesome power of God and saw his prayer answered in this long drought, this prophet who was on top of the world, all of a sudden we find him underneath this tree, and he says, just kill me. Just kill me. He said, it's enough. Take my life. For I am not better than my fathers. He lost, you see. He was lost. He didn't know what else to do. What do you do? What more can I do, God, to prove that you're God? What more can I do? What more can I say? What more can I preach? What more can I show? You know, I think that's how Jesus was, wasn't he? When everybody kept coming to Jesus and saying, show us another sign, show us another miracle. Don't you think at some point Jesus just wanted to sit down under a tree and said, just take me now, God, because these people don't listen. right? Worst day of his life. How can that happen? How can that happen that fast? And he's lost. He doesn't know what else to do. He doesn't know where he's supposed to go from here. And he says, I'm done, right? I'm done. Just take me, kill me. I'm done. What do you want me to do? I've done everything you wanted me to do. And it didn't work. I just don't know that I can get to the depths of the depression that Elijah was in. But he was finished. And God wasn't done. You know, the lesson in the story is so multifaceted about God and our relationship and our humanity and how we deal with situations and problems and our response to things that happen within our lives. I mean, I've seen people at this point, you know. But God wasn't done. And I think in the deepest despair you can get it in your life, I think that's what you need to know. God's not done. God's not asking your opinion. God doesn't want to know if you're done. God didn't ask Elijah if he was done. Because God wasn't done with Elijah. God's not done with you. It's not our decision, is it? You know, I can't tell you the conversations I've had with people in my life, older people, that told me, they said, I wish I was just dead because I'm not worth anything anymore. Yes, you are. Or God would take you. You might be done, but God's not done with you. You need to figure out what it is that you can do for God because He's not done with you. It's not our decision. It's not in our control. It's beyond that. And God did some things. And these things can be our things. Number one, God gave him nourishment. You know, if you ever had that worst day of your life, if you've ever had that day, or you will have that day, I mean, all of you have probably had bad days. I don't know that we've had our worst day, right? Would you agree with that? We've probably all had bad days, but I don't know that we've had our worst day yet. Do you? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't think I've had my worst day. I've had some really bad days. I've had a day I can say is my worst day up till now, but I haven't had my worst day. It's coming out there. Somewhere it's coming. I ain't had it yet. But I know one thing, when you have that bad day, you don't want to eat. You ever been there? You don't want to eat. You ever done that? You ever been there in your life where you didn't want to eat? Because you didn't want to. You ever had people say you need to eat? You ever had them do that? You need to eat. Isn't that what they do? Something happens in your life, people bring food. You're like, I'm not hungry. You need to eat. You don't want to eat. But you need to eat. You see, God knows that. Elijah, he was so depressed and so down, he wasn't even thinking about that. He just wanted to die. He just wanted to lay there and not eat and die. And so God sends this angel with angel food cake. Yes, that's true. And he hands this angel food cake to Elijah. It's the best angel food cake ever, right? And he gives Elijah this angel food cake, and he gives him something to drink. And so he ate, and he drank, and he lay down again, and the angel came a second time, touched him, and said, arise and eat. Because God's not done with you. That's my paraphrase. And eat, because God's not done with you yet. There's something else you need to do. You're not done. You know, I don't care if you quit in your brain, God's not going to quit on you. And when you have that worst day of your life, you need to remember God's not done with you. Period. And God's going to get you through that. And how's he going to do it? Well, one way he's going to do it is he's going to feed you. Remember what Jesus said? He said, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you have no part of me. What was he saying? Unless you put that nourishment of my word inside of you, unless you rely on that, you're not going to make it. Because my body is the bread from heaven, right? My blood is the drink. I am what you need to survive. I'm your nourishment. I'm going to get you through that tough day. I'm going to get you through that tough time. Feast on me is what Jesus is saying. Don't misunderstand exactly what Jesus is saying. John says, I'm the Word. Jesus is the Word. Jesus says, feast on me. Use me for nourishment. And that's what he did to Elijah. And Elijah is going to go 40 days and 40 nights on angel food cake to the Mount of Horeb. If you don't remember anything about this sermon, it's going to be angel food cake. Elijah ate angel food cake. So he did this, and he goes to the mount, right? But the next thing he did is he gave him purpose. You see why we get lost in life? I'm going to tell you, because I know this is true, because I've been lost. There's times in my life I've been lost. I'm just being honest. You know why we get lost? It's because we forget where we're going. Right? Ain't that why we get lost? We forget where we're going. We think about tomorrow, we think about school, we think about graduating, we think about kids, we think about marriage, we think about material things, we think about retirement, we think about death, and in all that, we forget where we're going. You know where you're going? Do you know where you're going? Does everybody in here know where you're going? If you ever forget where you're going, you're going to be lost. I'm going to say this right. Try to say this right. Okay? I'm going to try. You see, what happens is everybody in here, every one of us, every person, from little bitty to great big, everybody in here, we spend a lot of our lives trying to do for us and make for us and provide for us to get what we want, what we desire, what we think we deserve, to be in a position that we think we deserve to be in. We all do it. Everybody in here. That's us. That's human nature. I do the same thing. But I want to tell you something this morning. Every one of you in here needs a ministry. Everybody. I don't care who you are. And when I'm saying this, you're sitting out there saying, oh, not me, not me, not me. I'm telling you, everybody in this room needs a ministry. You need to find something that's God's. You do. I'm not kidding. Not joking. I'm telling you the truth. You know, it can be a lot of things. We have such a hard time getting people to sign up for the fellowship meals, where you got to put the food out and clean up when you're done. It takes you 2 or 3 hours of your Sunday to do that. We have a hard time getting people to do that in here, to sign up for that, to do that. You know, communion takes you 15, 20 minutes. Put communion together. You can get here 30 minutes early on a Sunday morning if you want, or you can come down here on Saturday night. We have a hard time getting people to sign up to do that, right? Maybe your ministry is your ministry. Maybe you like to talk to people. Maybe you're a John, wherever John went, likes to smile at everybody, right? Maybe your ministry is to go around this room and shake everybody's hand on a Sunday morning and tell them you're glad to see them. You know, that's a ministry. Am I right? Maybe your ministry is to send cards to people or to bring somebody dinner that needs dinner. Maybe your ministry is to send text messages, or maybe it's to help in the PowerPoint room or to do that kind of thing. Or maybe your ministry is to teach a class. John has such a hard time getting teachers. I've been in his situation. I know how hard it is to get people to teach. You know, you high schoolers, talk to Elijah about this. Some of you are old enough, you could do one of them classes. Elijah would be glad to help you teach one of them classes. He could tell you how to do that. That's a ministry. Because ministries in our life give us focus and goal and desire long past anything else, because it's never going to end. If you do a ministry for God, you always have a place in life. You always have something that's important, something you have to do that's never, ever going to change. You know, Carrie and Mickey are doing this backpack program. That's a great ministry. It's their ministry, not mine. It's theirs. That's their deal. And I'm so proud of them. And you know, the truth is, they both got young children. They both got young families. You know, them children are going to get old. Them children are going to graduate. Them children are going to leave. Their families are going to change. Things are going to happen. But I promise you one thing, throughout all that, there's still going to be kids down here at this school that need a backpack full of food. That's never going to change in their life, as long as they want to do it, until they give it to somebody else. Everyone in here needs a ministry. I don't know what yours is. I ain't telling you what to do. I'm just telling you right now, if you're not doing anything for God in your life, if you don't have a ministry for God, if you don't have a purpose for God, you're missing out. You need to do that, because that will give you a purpose in life that is beyond the things of this life. That's what God did to Elijah. God said, go and return your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall. Listen to what he says. This is what you're going to do. I'm not done with you, Elijah. He says, you're gonna anoint Hazael king over Ram, Jehu the son of Nimshi. Oh, Jehu, oh God. If you ever get a chance to read about somebody in the Bible, read about Jehu. Oh, it's fascinating, right? Jehu's a great character in the Bible. It says, you shall anoint his prophet in your place. You're going to anoint Elisha, right? That's still coming up. And it shall come about, the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall put to death. The one who escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall put to death. I'm going to vindicate you. And you know the beautiful thing about the story of Elijah, most beautiful thing about it, is that when God was done with Elijah, he took him up in a chariot of fire. When God said, I'm done, he took him up in a chariot of fire. It was never Elijah's decision when he was done. It was never Elijah's decision to quit. It was God's decision. And you know, I'm going to tell you the last thing he told Elijah, and the last thing I'm going to tell you this morning is you are not alone. You know, that was what got Elijah more than anything. He said, I alone am left. It's only me. I'm the last one. Have you played this mind game in your head? I've played this mind game a few times, and I asked myself this question. What if I was the last Christian on earth? You know, they always show them shows where like it's the last man on earth or whatever. What if he was the last Christian on earth, the last one? Nobody else believed in Jesus. Nobody else believed but you. You were the last Christian on the earth. What if? That'd be lonely. Wouldn't that be lonely? That would be so lonely. To be the last person, not to have brothers and sisters to meet with and to talk to and to rely on, to be alone in the world. That would be so lonely. And that's what Elijah thought. But then God comes to Elijah and he says, listen, Elijah. He says, there's 7,000 who have not bowed their knee to Baal, not bowed to Baal. 7,000. He said, Elijah, you're not alone. He told Elijah 3 things that help us not ever to be lost. He said, number 1, nourish yourself with God's word. He said, number 2, you're not done until I tell you you're done. I don't care where you are. I don't care what's going on in your life. You can find a purpose. You know I've had you for a minute, but I'm going to tell you this story. It's about J.A. Riley. He was an elder here, if you don't remember that, many years ago. And his wife, Glenda, she had a brain bleed and was in the hospital. We didn't think she was going to make it. And you would go to see her, and he was there for a month or better. And J.A. set up shop in that waiting room. He brought 2 people to Christ. All the families that called asked for J.A. because he knew what was going on. He became the minister of the waiting room up there for a month. And everybody knew him. And everybody knew who he was. And everybody knew what he was. CJA said, well, maybe I'm up here sitting in this waiting room, but God's not done with me yet. So I don't know where you're at in your life. I don't know what's going on in your life. But I'll tell you one thing. God's not done with you until he's done. And when he's done, you're dead. So until you quit breathing, God ain't done. And you don't need to be done either. You need to find in your life what gives you purpose for God, because there's no reason for a Christian to ever be lost. Would you agree with that? There's no reason for a Christian to ever be lost. We know where we're at. We know our purpose. And most importantly, we know where we are going. Right? Amen? If we can help you in any way, won't you let it be known while we stand?